I'm Jessica Martinez. And 6 months ago, I stood in the sleek lobby of InnovateTech Solutions holding a cashier's check for $75,000, watching my husband's boss David Thompson's face turn 3 different shades of red as I announced I had just purchased his ex-wife's boutique. The same business he'd been secretly sabotaging for months while telling anyone who'd listen that marriage was a fool's game and successful relationships were nothing but fairy tales. The look of absolute shock on his face when he realized his employee's wife had just outmaneuvered him in the most personal way possible was worth every penny of our life savings and then some. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The story really begins 18 months earlier, when my life looked completely different than it does today. Ryan and I had just celebrated our 4th wedding anniversary in our cozy 3-bedroom house in Cedar Park, a peaceful suburb north of Austin where the biggest excitement was usually the weekly farmers market or the occasional food truck festival. We were living what most people would consider a comfortable middle-class existence. Ryan brought home $85,000 a year as a senior software developer at InnovateTech Solutions, while I earned $45,000 as a marketing coordinator for a local nonprofit focused on environmental education. Together, we were raising our 7-year-old daughter Sophie, who had Ryan's dark eyes and my stubborn streak, and who spent her afternoons perfecting cartwheels in our backyard while we grilled burgers and talked about everything and nothing. Our routine was predictable in the best possible way. Saturday mornings meant pancakes and cartoons with Sophie sprawled between us on the couch, still in her unicorn pajamas. Sunday afternoons found us exploring Austin's endless supply of food trucks, usually ending up at Zilker Park where Sophie would chase ducks while Ryan and I shared conversations about work, weekend plans, and the small dreams that made up our shared life. We talked about eventually renovating the kitchen, maybe taking a family trip to Colorado, and whether Sophie was old enough for swimming lessons at the community center. These weren't grand ambitions, but they were ours, and they felt solid in a way that made me believe we had figured out something important about building a life together. Ryan loved his job at InnovateTech, or at least he had for the first 5 years he worked there. The company specialized in developing custom software solutions for small businesses, and Ryan thrived on the problem-solving aspects of coding and the collaborative environment with his team. His colleagues Jake Mitchell and several others had become genuine friends, people we'd have over for backyard barbecues or meet for drinks at one of Austin's many craft breweries. InnovateTech had grown from a startup to a mid-sized company with over 200 employees, and Ryan took pride in being part of that growth. He'd often come home energized by a particularly challenging project or excited about a new technology the team was implementing. The company's founder and CEO, David Thompson, had been a different person back then, or at least that's how it seemed from the outside. During company holiday parties and the annual summer picnic at Lake Austin, David appeared to be a successful entrepreneur who had built something meaningful. He was married to Karen, an elegant woman with warm brown eyes and an infectious laugh who worked as an interior designer. They seemed like the kind of couple who had their act together, hosting dinner parties and taking exotic vacations to places like Tuscany and Costa Rica. Ryan would occasionally mention David's business insights or his latest acquisition of art for the office, painting a picture of a boss who was demanding but fair, someone who had created a workplace culture that valued innovation and work-life balance. I had met David Thompson exactly 3 times during those early years. The first was at Ryan's company Christmas party 2 years after he started working there, held at an upscale venue downtown near Lady Bird Lake. David had been charming and attentive, asking thoughtful questions about my work with the environmental nonprofit and genuinely listening to my answers. He and Karen seemed perfectly matched, finishing each other's sentences and sharing inside jokes that spoke to years of partnership. The second meeting was at the company picnic where I watched David organize games for the employees' children with the kind of enthusiasm that suggested he genuinely enjoyed these family-oriented events. The third time was at a brief encounter in the InnovateTech lobby when I was dropping off Ryan's forgotten lunch and David had been warm and professional, asking after Sophie and mentioning that Karen was always talking about redecorating their home office. Everything changed when David and Karen's marriage imploded in what Ryan described as a spectacular and very public divorce. The details filtered through the office gossip network in fragments that Ryan would reluctantly share with me over dinner. Apparently, the split involved accusations of financial deception, emotional manipulation, and a complete breakdown of communication that had been building for years beneath their polished exterior. Karen had filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, but the legal proceedings revealed deeper issues, including David's controlling behavior around money and his inability to respect boundaries when it came to Karen's career aspirations. The divorce settlement was substantial, with Karen receiving a significant portion of their shared assets, including enough money to start fresh and pursue the business ventures David had previously discouraged. Within 6 months of the divorce being finalized, David Thompson became a completely different person, at least in terms of how he interacted with his employees and the world in general. The charming family-oriented CEO was replaced by someone bitter, cynical, and seemingly determined to prove that everyone else's relationships were doomed to fail just like his had. Ryan started coming home with stories about David's increasingly inappropriate comments during staff meetings, casual remarks about how marriage was a legal scheme designed to trap successful men, and pointed observations about how much more productive and financially secure his divorced male employees seemed to be compared to their married counterparts.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
At first, these comments seemed like the typical processing that people go through after a major life change. Nobody expected David to be sunshine and rainbows immediately after his divorce, and Ryan tried to give his boss the benefit of the doubt, figuring the negativity would fade as David adjusted to his new reality. But instead of improving, David's attitude grew more toxic and more personally invasive. He began making comments about specific employees' relationships, questioning why anyone would choose to financially handicap themselves through marriage, and suggesting that his married employees were naive for believing their relationships would last longer than his had. The breaking point for me came on a Thursday evening in March, when Ryan walked through our front door, looking defeated in a way I'd never seen before. Sophie was at her weekly art class, so it was just the two of us in the kitchen as I prepared dinner and listened to Ryan recount his day. During the afternoon team meeting, David had spent nearly 20 minutes explaining why he believed marriage was an outdated institution that prevented people from reaching their full potential. He'd used Ryan and me as a specific example, suggesting that Ryan would be making significantly more money and advancing faster in his career if he wasn't weighed down by family obligations and the financial burden of supporting a wife and child. The personal nature of the attack was bad enough, but what really bothered me was learning that this wasn't an isolated incident. David had been making similar comments about other married employees for weeks, creating an increasingly uncomfortable work environment where people felt judged and undermined for their personal choices. Ryan's colleague Jake had confided that he was considering looking for a new job because David's constant negativity about relationships was affecting his own marriage. As his wife grew tired of hearing about her husband's boss, who seemed to take pleasure in predicting the failure of every relationship around him. That night, as Ryan and I talked through the situation, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about workplace harassment or an inappropriate boss overstepping boundaries. This was about someone using his position of power to actively undermine the happiness and confidence of the people who worked for him, people whose relationships and families were being treated as targets for his own unresolved anger and bitterness. David Thompson wasn't just processing his divorce, he was weaponizing it against anyone who dared to believe that lasting partnerships were possible. The next morning, I found myself thinking about Karen Thompson in a way I never had before. During our brief previous encounters, she had struck me as intelligent, creative, and genuinely kind, someone who seemed to approach the world with curiosity rather than cynicism. If David was this bitter and controlling toward his employees, what had their marriage actually been like? How had she endured years of living with someone who was now revealing himself to be manipulative and emotionally destructive? And what was she doing now, 18 months post-divorce, with the settlement money and the freedom to build whatever life she wanted? My curiosity led me to social media, where I discovered that Karen had indeed started fresh. Her Instagram account, which had previously featured the carefully curated photos typical of corporate wives, had transformed into something completely different. She was documenting the launch of her new business venture, a boutique called Bloom & Company located in South Austin's trendy shopping district. The photos showed beautiful, sustainable fashion pieces from local designers, carefully styled displays, and glimpses of Karen herself looking genuinely happy in ways that seemed more authentic than any of the polished couple's photos from her married life. Bloom & Company appeared to be exactly the kind of business Austin needed more of, focusing on ethical fashion, supporting local artisans, and creating a shopping experience that prioritized quality over quantity. Karen's post showed her genuine passion for the work, from early morning coffee runs to late nights arranging displays, and her excitement about connecting customers with pieces that reflected their personal style while supporting responsible manufacturing practices. The business had been open for 8 months, and from what I could see online, it was gaining traction with Austin's environmentally conscious consumers, who were always looking for alternatives to fast fashion. But as I dug deeper into the business's online presence, I started noticing things that concerned me. Recent posts were less frequent and seemed more strained. Customer reviews, while generally positive, mentioned irregular hours and delays in special orders. Karen's most recent Instagram stories showed her working alone in the boutique late at night, looking exhausted and overwhelmed, in ways that suggested the business was struggling despite its strong concept and beautiful presentation. My suspicions about Bloom & Company challenges were confirmed in the most unexpected way possible. The following week, Ryan came home with news that sent chills down my spine. During a casual conversation in the office break room, David had been bragging to Jake about how he was helping his ex-wife learn some important lessons about business ownership. When Jake pressed for details, David had laughed and explained that he'd been using his connections in Austin's business community to make things difficult for Karen's boutique. He'd convinced several potential suppliers to reconsider working with Bloom & Company, spread rumors about Karen's financial instability to other business owners, and even discouraged potential customers by suggesting the boutique was poorly managed and likely to close soon. The revelation that David was actively sabotaging his ex-wife's business while simultaneously using their failed marriage as ammunition against his employees was the moment I realized something had to be done. This wasn't just inappropriate workplace behavior anymore, this was a systematic campaign of harassment and economic sabotage against a woman who was trying to rebuild her life after escaping what was clearly a toxic relationship. David Thompson was using his power, connections, and resources to ensure that Karen's attempt at independence would fail, all while positioning himself as the wise truth-teller who had always known that people like her weren't capable of success on their own. That weekend, while Sophie played in the backyard and Ryan worked on a freelance project, I began researching everything I could find about Bloom & Company's business model, financial structure, and market position. What I discovered was a company with enormous potential that was being artificially handicapped by external forces rather than internal failures. Karen had identified a genuine market need, developed relationships with quality suppliers and designers, and created a brand identity that resonated with Austin's values. The business was struggling not because the concept was flawed, but because David's interference was creating obstacles that no new business owner should have to navigate, while also learning the basics of entrepreneurship. As I read through customer reviews, supplier information, and industry analysis, an idea began forming that felt both completely crazy and absolutely necessary. What if David Thompson's certainty about the failure of relationships and the incompetence of his ex-wife could be challenged in the most direct way possible? What if someone could step in to support Karen's business, prove that her vision was viable, and demonstrate that partnerships, whether in marriage or business, could thrive when built on mutual respect rather than control and manipulation? The idea of buying Bloom & Company seemed impossible at first, given our family's financial situation and my complete lack of experience in retail business ownership. But the more I researched the boutique's financials and market position, the more convinced I became that this could work. The business was generating approximately $15,000 in monthly revenue with $8,500 in monthly expenses, leaving a healthy profit margin that was being undermined primarily by the external pressures David was creating. With proper support, marketing expertise, and freedom from sabotage, Bloom & Company could easily grow into a thriving enterprise that would prove David wrong about everything he'd been preaching to his employees. The financial requirements were daunting but not impossible. Karen was asking $75,000 for the business, including inventory, fixtures, and existing customer relationships. Ryan and I had $12,000 in savings, he had $35,000 available through a 401k loan option, and I calculated that we could secure the remaining amount through a combination of small business loans and creative financing. It would require risking everything we'd saved and taking on debt that would change our family's financial picture dramatically. But it would also position us to own a business with genuine growth potential while striking a blow against the kind of toxic masculinity and economic bullying that David represented. The question wasn't whether we could afford to buy Bloom & Company, the question was whether we could afford not to. Every day that David continued his campaign against Karen's business was another day that his poisonous attitude toward relationships went unchallenged at InnovateTech. Every week that passed without intervention was another week that Ryan and his colleagues had to endure workplace harassment disguised as wisdom, and another week that Karen struggled alone against obstacles that shouldn't have existed in the first place. By Sunday night, I had made my decision. Monday morning, I would start making phone calls to set up meetings with Karen, business loan officers, and anyone else who could help turn this impossible idea into reality. David Thompson was about to learn that not everyone shared his cynical view of partnerships, and that sometimes the people he underestimated most were exactly the ones capable of proving him spectacularly wrong. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp February air that made Austin feel like a city full of possibilities. I dropped Sophie off at Cedar Park Elementary with my usual kiss and reminder to pay attention during math class, but internally I was buzzing with nervous energy about the calls I planned to make once I got to my office. The environmental nonprofit where I worked occupied a converted warehouse in East Austin, and my desk overlooked a community garden where volunteers grew vegetables for the local food bank. It was the kind of place where people believed in making positive changes in the world, which felt appropriate for what I was about to attempt. My first call was to Karen Thompson directly. I had found her business number on the Bloom & Company website, and after rehearsing my introduction several times, I dialed with shaking fingers. When Karen answered, her voice was professional but warm, exactly as I remembered from our brief encounters during happier times in her marriage. I introduced myself as Ryan Martinez's wife, explained that I had been following her boutique's progress on social media, and asked if she might be available to meet for coffee to discuss a potential business opportunity. Karen seemed surprised but pleased by the call, and we arranged to meet the following afternoon at Grind Coffee House, a local spot known for its strong espresso and relaxed atmosphere that would allow for private conversation. The rest of Monday was dedicated to research and financial planning. I spent my lunch break calling our bank to inquire about small business loan options, learning about documentation requirements, credit score impacts, and the timeline for approval processes. The loan officer, a patient woman named Patricia, who had clearly helped many first-time entrepreneurs navigate these waters, explained that I would need a comprehensive business plan, financial projections, and proof of personal assets before they could consider any application. She also mentioned that retail businesses were considered higher-risk investments, which meant interest rates would be higher and approval criteria more stringent than for other types of ventures. After work, I stopped by the business section of the Austin Public Library, checking out books on retail management, small business acquisition, and fashion industry trends. That evening, while Ryan helped Sophie with homework at the kitchen table, I spread financial documents across our living room coffee table and began calculating exactly what buying Bloom & Company would mean for our family's budget. The numbers were sobering but not impossible. We would need to eliminate most discretionary spending, postpone the kitchen renovation we had been planning, and live much more frugally for at least the first 2 years, while the business established itself. But the potential returns, based on the boutique's current performance and growth possibilities, suggested this could be a genuine investment in our family's future, rather than just an expensive way to prove a point to David Thompson. Ryan's reaction to my preliminary research was a mixture of admiration and concern. He understood my frustration with his boss's behavior and agreed that someone needed to challenge David's toxic attitudes, but he worried about the financial risks and the potential impact on his own job security. If we bought Karen's business and David discovered our involvement, it could easily result in Ryan being fired or facing increased harassment at work. We talked through various scenarios late into the night, weighing the potential benefits against the very real dangers of taking such a public stand against someone who held significant power over our primary source of income. Tuesday afternoon's meeting with Karen exceeded my expectations in every possible way. She arrived at Grind Coffee House, looking polished but tired, wearing one of the elegant blazers I recognized from her boutique's Instagram photos. After ordering our drinks, we found a quiet corner table where Karen listened with growing amazement as I explained my background in marketing, my interest in supporting local businesses, and my preliminary research into Bloom & Company's market position. What impressed me most was Karen's immediate transparency about both the successes and challenges she was facing as a new business owner. Karen explained that Bloom and Company had been her dream for over a decade, something she had wanted to pursue throughout her marriage, but had been discouraged from attempting by David, who insisted that retail was too risky and that her time would be better spent supporting his business endeavors. The divorce settlement had finally given her the financial freedom to pursue this vision, and the first 6 months had been incredibly rewarding despite the steep learning curve. She had developed relationships with 12 local designers, established a customer base of environmentally conscious women who appreciated sustainable fashion, and created an online presence that was generating sales beyond the Austin area. However, the last 4 months had brought unexpected challenges that were testing her resolve and depleting her resources faster than anticipated. Several suppliers had unexpectedly terminated their relationships with Bloom and Company, citing concerns about payment reliability that Karen knew were unfounded since she had never been late with any payments. 2 potential investors had withdrawn their interest after receiving what they described as concerning information about the boutique's management, though they refused to specify what those concerns were or where the information had originated. Most frustratingly, she had noticed a pattern of potential customers mentioning that they had heard negative things about the boutique from other business owners, though no one could provide specific details about what those negative things actually were. As Karen described these obstacles, I felt my suspicions about David's interference being confirmed in real time. The pattern of suppliers pulling out, investors withdrawing, and general negative rumors spreading through Austin's business community was exactly what Ryan had described David bragging about in the office break room. Karen had no idea that her ex-husband was orchestrating these problems, which made her confusion and frustration even more heartbreaking to witness. She was blaming herself for business challenges that were actually the result of deliberate sabotage, wondering if she lacked the skills necessary for entrepreneurship, when the reality was that she was succeeding despite extraordinary external pressure. When I carefully broached the subject of David's attitude toward her business, Karen's expression shifted from professional politeness to genuine pain. She admitted that their divorce had been acrimonious, with David making it clear that he expected her new venture to fail, as proof that she had always been dependent on his success, rather than capable of creating her own. She had hoped that once the legal proceedings were finalized, they could maintain enough civility for the sake of their shared business connections and mutual friends, but David seemed determined to prove that she was incompetent and destined for failure. Karen's description of her marriage painted a picture of gradual erosion of confidence and autonomy that explained a lot about David's current behavior toward his employees. Throughout their 15-year relationship, David had consistently positioned himself as the practical, business-savvy partner, while treating Karen's interests and ambitions as hobbies that were cute but not serious. He had discouraged her from pursuing professional opportunities that might compete with his need to be the primary breadwinner, dismissed her ideas about starting her own business as unrealistic fantasies, and gradually convinced her that her value lay in supporting his success rather than creating her own. The divorce had been Karen's assertion of independence, after years of feeling diminished and controlled, but David was clearly unable to accept that she might actually be capable of succeeding without him. His campaign to undermine Bloom and Company wasn't just about business competition, it was about proving that his worldview had been correct all along, that Karen was indeed dependent and incompetent, and that her attempt at independence would inevitably end in failure that would vindicate his treatment of her throughout their marriage. By the end of our 2-hour conversation, I was more convinced than ever that buying Bloom and Company was not just a sound business decision, but a moral imperative. Karen was brilliant, hardworking, and passionate about her vision for sustainable fashion in Austin. Her business model was solid, her customer relationships were strong, and her growth potential was enormous. The only thing standing between her and success was David's systematic campaign of interference, which could be neutralized if someone with resources and determination stepped in to provide support. When I explained my interest in purchasing the boutique, Karen's initial reaction was disbelief, followed by cautious hope. She had been considering whether to continue fighting the uphill battle or cut her losses and find a more traditional job, so the possibility of selling to someone who understood and appreciated her vision felt like an unexpected lifeline. We agreed that she would prepare detailed financial records and business documentation for my review, while I would work on securing financing and developing a transition plan that would allow her to remain involved with the business if she chose to do so. Wednesday and Thursday were consumed with practical preparations for what was beginning to feel like an inevitable decision. I met with Patricia at the bank to submit a preliminary loan application, providing our family's financial information and explaining my background in marketing as relevant experience for retail business ownership. She was encouraging about our creditworthiness and assets, though she emphasized that small business loans required extensive documentation and could take several weeks for approval. Meanwhile, Ryan was navigating increasingly uncomfortable situations at InnovateTech, as David's commentary about marriage and relationships became more frequent and more personally targeted. During Wednesday's team meeting, David had launched into a 20-minute monologue about how the most successful men throughout history had either remained single or treated marriage as a business arrangement rather than an emotional partnership. He specifically mentioned that he was curious to see how various employees' career trajectories would change once they realized that family obligations were
holding them back from reaching their full potential. Thursday brought news that made our decision feel even more urgent. Jake Mitchell confided to Ryan that he was actively job hunting because David's constant negativity about relationships was affecting his home life. Jake's wife was tired of hearing about her husband's boss, who seemed to take pleasure in predicting marital failure, and she was beginning to question whether the toxic work environment was worth the financial stability the job provided. If Jake left InnovateTech, he would be the third married employee to quit in the past 6 months, creating a pattern that suggested David's behavior was driving away some of the company's most stable and productive workers. That evening, as Ryan and I reviewed Karen's financial documents and business projections, the potential for success became undeniably clear. Bloom & Company was generating consistent revenue with healthy profit margins, had established relationships with reliable customers, and operated in a market with significant growth potential. Austin's population was growing rapidly, bringing more environmentally conscious consumers who would appreciate the boutique's focus on sustainable fashion. The business had strong fundamentals that were being undermined by external interference rather than internal problems. Friday afternoon brought the meeting that would change everything. Karen and I met again at Grind Coffee House, this time with boxes of financial records, supplier contracts, inventory lists, and legal documents that told the complete story of Bloom & Company's first 8 months in business. As we spread the paperwork across 2 tables, Karen walked me through every aspect of the operation, from her relationships with local designers to her strategies for online marketing and customer retention. The numbers were even better than I had hoped. Despite the obstacles David had created, Bloom & Company was approaching $20,000 in monthly revenue, with monthly expenses that had stabilized around $9,000. The profit margins were healthy, the customer base was growing, and the inventory turnover was strong enough to support expansion into additional product lines. Karen had also developed an online presence that was generating sales from customers across Texas and neighboring states, suggesting that the business had potential beyond its South Austin location. More importantly, Karen's passion for the work was infectious. As she described her vision for expanding into accessories, partnering with more local artisans, and potentially opening a second location, I could see exactly why David had felt threatened by her independence. This wasn't a woman playing at business ownership, this was an entrepreneur with a clear vision and the skills to execute it. The fact that she had achieved this level of success while simultaneously dealing with her ex-husband's sabotage spoke to a resilience and determination that convinced me she would be an ideal business partner. By the end of our meeting, we had reached a preliminary agreement. I would purchase Bloom & Company for $75,000 with the understanding that Karen would remain involved as a paid consultant for the first 6 months to ensure a smooth transition. She would retain creative control over product selection and store aesthetics, while I would focus on marketing, financial management, and business development. We would split profits according to our respective contributions and investments, with the goal of eventually expanding the business enough to support both of us as full-time income. The weekend was spent in intense financial planning and family discussions about what this decision would mean for our daily lives. Ryan and I calculated that we could manage the purchase price through a combination of our savings, his 401k loan, and a small business loan that would cover the remaining amount. We would need to live much more frugally for the foreseeable future, eliminating restaurant meals, postponing vacation plans, and being much more careful about discretionary spending. Sophie would need to understand that some of the extras she was accustomed to might not be available while we invested in the business, though we were committed to ensuring that her basic needs and educational opportunities remained unaffected. Ryan's biggest concern was still the potential impact on his job security, but after a weekend of discussion, he agreed that we couldn't continue living under David's increasingly toxic influence without taking some kind of action. If we were going to challenge David's worldview and support Karen's business, we needed to be prepared for whatever consequences might follow. The potential benefits, both financial and personal, were significant enough to justify the risks involved. Sunday evening, I called Karen to confirm our agreement and begin the formal process of business acquisition. She was emotional during our conversation, explaining that she had been prepared to close Bloom and Company within the next month if she couldn't find a way to overcome the obstacles she was facing. The opportunity to not only continue the business but to grow it with a partner who understood and supported her vision felt like a miracle she hadn't dared to hope for. Monday morning would begin the process of turning our agreement into legal reality, but first we needed to navigate the complex logistics of financing, legal documentation, and transition planning. I had already scheduled meetings with our bank, a small business attorney, and an accountant who specialized in retail acquisitions. The next few weeks would be intense and stressful, but they would also determine whether we could actually pull off what still felt like an impossible plan. As I lay in bed Sunday night, listening to Ryan's steady breathing and thinking about the magnitude of what we were about to attempt, I felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration that reminded me of the night before Sophie was born. We were about to change our family's entire trajectory based on a combination of business analysis, moral conviction, and pure determination to prove that David Thompson's cynical worldview was fundamentally wrong. In a few weeks, I would either be the proud co-owner of a thriving boutique or we would be facing financial disaster and unemployment. Either way, we would finally be taking a stand against the kind of toxic behavior that too many people tolerate because challenging it seems too risky or too difficult. The stakes couldn't have been higher, but the potential rewards, both personal and financial, made the risk feel not just worthwhile but absolutely necessary. The next 3 weeks became a whirlwind of paperwork, meetings, and sleepless nights as the reality of acquiring a business revealed itself to be far more complex than I had initially imagined. Every morning began with phone calls to banks, lawyers, or accountants, followed by evenings spent reviewing contracts and financial projections while Sophie worked on homework at the kitchen table. Ryan had taken on extra freelance projects to help offset the costs of business acquisition, which meant our house often felt like a dual command center with both of us hunched over laptops in different rooms, chasing different aspects of our shared goal. The small business loan process proved to be particularly challenging, requiring documentation I hadn't anticipated and raising questions about my qualifications that forced me to articulate my vision more clearly than ever before. Patricia at the bank was supportive but thorough, requiring detailed market analysis, competitive research, and financial projections that demonstrated my understanding of retail business fundamentals. I spent an entire weekend creating a comprehensive business plan that outlined Austin's fashion market, Bloom and Company's position within that market, and my strategies for growth over the next 5 years. Meanwhile, Karen was navigating her own set of complications as word began to spread through Austin's small business community that she was considering selling Bloom and Company. Several other potential buyers emerged, including a local investment group that offered more money but wanted to completely rebrand the boutique and eliminate its focus on sustainable fashion. Karen was torn between the financial security of accepting a higher offer and the desire to see her vision continue under ownership that understood and appreciated what she had built. Our twice-weekly coffee meetings became intensive strategy sessions where we refined our partnership agreement and planned for various contingencies. Karen brought insights about supplier relationships, seasonal buying patterns, and customer preferences that I could never have gained from financial documents alone. I contributed marketing strategies, operational improvements, and financial management systems that could help the business scale more efficiently. What emerged from these conversations was a clear picture of how our different skills could complement each other to create something stronger than either of us could achieve independently. The legal complexities of business acquisition were mind-boggling. Our attorney Maria Santos guided us through asset purchase agreements, liability transfers, lease assignments, and intellectual property considerations that seemed to multiply daily. Every contract revealed new details that required negotiation, from the transfer of vendor relationships to the handling of existing inventory to the allocation of responsibility for outstanding orders. Maria emphasized repeatedly that we needed to understand exactly what we were buying and what obligations we were assuming, which meant reading every document carefully rather than rushing toward a closing date. At InnovateTech, David's behavior was escalating in ways that made Ryan's work environment increasingly uncomfortable. The previous week, David had instituted what he called efficiency reviews for all employees, during which he questioned their personal commitments and suggested that those with fewer family obligations were naturally more valuable to the company. Ryan came home each day with news stories about colleagues being called into David's office for inappropriate discussions about their relationships, their financial priorities, and their commitment to advancing their careers over their personal lives. Jake Mitchell finally submitted his resignation, citing the need to find a workplace that was more aligned with his values. His departure was a loss for the development team and a wake-up call for other employees who were beginning to realize that David's toxic attitudes weren't just temporary post-divorce processing but a permanent shift in company culture. Two other married employees had started quietly updating their resumes and networking for new positions, creating an atmosphere of uncertainty and stress that was affecting productivity across multiple departments. Ryan's own position felt increasingly precarious as David seemed to take special pleasure in undermining him during team meetings and assigning him projects with impossible deadlines or unclear requirements. Ryan suspected that David was testing his loyalty and looking for reasons to justify termination, which added another layer of urgency to our business acquisition timeline. If Ryan lost his job before we completed the purchase of Bloom and Company, our financing options would disappear, and our family would face both unemployment and debt without the business income we were counting on to justify the investment. The breakthrough came during the fourth week when our small business loan was approved for $40,000, covering the gap between our available funds and the purchase price. Patricia had been impressed by our business plan and Karen's existing customer relationships, describing Bloom and Company as exactly the kind of local business that banks wanted to support. The approval came with conditions and requirements that would keep us accountable for the business's performance, but it also meant we could move forward with confidence that the financing was secure. Karen's decision to accept our offer over the higher bid from the investment group was motivated by her desire to preserve the boutique's mission and her belief that our partnership could grow the business in ways that aligned with her original vision. The investment group had made it clear that they saw sustainable fashion as a niche market with limited growth potential, while we viewed it as an emerging trend with enormous opportunity in a city like Austin. Karen valued the chance to remain involved with Bloom and Company's creative direction and to see her work continue under ownership that shared her commitment to ethical business practices. The final week before closing was consumed with due diligence activities that revealed both encouraging discoveries and unexpected challenges. An inventory audit showed that Bloom and Company's stock was worth more than the financial records indicated, with several designer pieces that had appreciated in value since their purchase. Customer surveys revealed higher satisfaction rates and stronger brand loyalty than I had anticipated, suggesting that the business had deeper roots in Austin's fashion community than its 8-month history might suggest. However, we also discovered the full extent of David's interference campaign when Karen finally confronted one of the suppliers who had terminated their relationship with Bloom and Company. After persistent questioning, the supplier admitted that David had contacted him personally, claiming to be concerned about Karen's mental stability following their divorce and suggesting that doing business with her would be risky because she was making irrational decisions and struggling with financial management. Similar conversations had apparently taken place with other vendors, potential investors, and even some customers, creating a network of doubt and concern that had no basis in reality but was damaging the business's reputation nonetheless. Learning about the specifics of David's sabotage campaign was infuriating but also clarifying. This wasn't just about his inability to accept his ex-wife's independence, it was a deliberate effort to destroy her livelihood and force her back into dependence. The cruelty and calculation involved in systematically undermining someone's business relationships while pretending to be concerned about their welfare revealed a level of manipulation that explained a lot about the toxic environment he was creating at InnovateTech. Ryan and I spent long evenings discussing whether to confront David directly about his behavior or to proceed with our business acquisition without revealing our knowledge of his interference. We ultimately decided that surprise would be our best strategy, allowing us to complete the purchase and stabilize the business before David realized what was happening. Once Bloom and Company was thriving under new ownership, his sabotage tactics would become irrelevant, and his predictions about Karen's incompetence would be proven publicly wrong. The night before our scheduled closing, I could barely sleep as the magnitude of what we were about to do settled in my mind. Tomorrow we would become business owners, taking on debt and responsibility that would change our family's financial picture for years to come. We would be challenging David Thompson's worldview in the most direct way possible, proving that partnerships could succeed and that his cynical predictions about failure were wrong. Most importantly, we would be giving Karen the support she needed to prove that her business vision was viable and that she was capable of the independence David had tried to deny her. Sophie had been remarkably understanding about the changes our business acquisition would require, accepting that family dinners might happen later and weekend activities might be more limited, while we established ourselves as entrepreneurs. Her excitement about having a mom who owned a fancy clothes store was infectious, and her suggestions for the boutique often revealed insights that neither Karen nor I had considered. During one dinner conversation, she asked why we didn't sell clothes for kids too, pointing out that parents shopping for themselves might want to find special outfits for their children at the same time. The closing itself took place on a Friday morning at Maria Santos's law office, with Karen and me sitting across from each other at a conference table covered with signature pages, checks, and transfer documents. The process was both anticlimactic and deeply emotional, requiring hours of signing paperwork to formalize what we had been planning for weeks. When we finally shook hands as official business partners, Karen had tears in her eyes as she thanked me for believing in her vision when she had almost given up on it herself. Our first official act as co-owners was to visit Bloom & Company, together walking through the boutique as partners rather than potential buyer and seller. The space felt different knowing that I now had the authority and responsibility to make decisions about its future, and I found myself seeing possibilities that hadn't been apparent during my previous visits. The back room could be converted into a workspace for local designers, the front window displays could be updated more frequently to showcase seasonal collections, and the online presence could be expanded to reach customers throughout Texas and beyond. Karen's relief at having a partner was evident as she showed me details about the business that she had been managing entirely alone for 8 months. From vendor relationships to customer preferences to seasonal buying patterns, she had accumulated knowledge that would have taken me years to develop independently. Her willingness to share this information and to trust me with the business she had built from nothing was both humbling and energizing. The weekend was spent developing immediate priorities and long-term strategies for Bloom & Company's growth. We created task lists that divided responsibilities according to our respective strengths, with Karen focusing on product selection and creative direction while I handled marketing, financial management, and business development. We also established communication protocols and decision-making processes that would prevent conflicts and ensure that we remained aligned on the boutique's direction. Monday morning brought our first challenge as business owners when one of Bloom & Company's key suppliers called to discuss concerns about the ownership change. Word was spreading through Austin's business community that the boutique had new owners, and some vendors wanted reassurance about payment terms and order volumes before committing to continued relationships. Karen and I spent the day making phone calls and scheduling meetings to introduce me as her business partner and to demonstrate that Bloom & Company was now stronger and more stable than ever. The positive response from most suppliers was encouraging, with several expressing enthusiasm about working with a business that now had additional marketing expertise and financial resources. One designer even mentioned that she had been hesitant to expand her relationship with Bloom & Company because she wasn't sure about Karen's ability to manage growth, but the addition of a business partner made her much more confident about increasing her product line with the boutique. By the end of our first week as official co-owners, the changes were already apparent. Customer traffic had increased, partly due to curiosity about the ownership change, but also because of immediate improvements we had implemented in store layout and product presentation. Our social media engagement had improved significantly thanks to more frequent posting and better photography of new arrivals. Most importantly, Karen seemed energized and optimistic in ways that reminded me why I had been so impressed by her vision during our first coffee meeting. The real test would come when David Thompson learned about our involvement with Bloom & Company, but for now we were focused on proving that the business could thrive with proper support and freedom from sabotage. Every successful day was evidence that Karen's vision had been sound all along, and that partnerships built on mutual respect could achieve things that neither person could accomplish alone. David's cynical predictions about failure were already being proven wrong, and we had only just begun to show what was possible when people worked together instead of tearing each other down. Ryan's reports from InnovateTech suggested that David had noticed Jake's departure and was becoming increasingly frustrated with what he perceived as disloyalty among his married employees. He had started making comments about needing to hire people who were more committed to their careers than their personal relationships, suggesting that he was planning to restructure the company around his belief that single employees were inherently more valuable. The irony of his anti-partnership stance was becoming more apparent every day as Ryan and I demonstrated that our marriage was actually making us both stronger and more capable of taking on challenges like business ownership. The foundation was set for everything that would follow, but we knew that the real work was just beginning. Bloom & Company had enormous potential, but realizing that potential would require months of careful planning, strategic marketing, and dedicated effort from both Karen and me. David's interference had been neutralized, but we still needed to prove that sustainable fashion could be profitable in Austin's competitive retail market. Most importantly, we needed to show that partnerships, whether in marriage or business, could create success that neither person could achieve independently. The stage was set for a confrontation between two completely different philosophies about relationships, success, and what it meant to support the people around you. The moment I had been both anticipating and dreading arrived on a Tuesday morning in mid-April, exactly 6 weeks after Karen and I had officially become business partners. I was arranging a new spring collection from a local designer when Ryan called, his voice tight with barely controlled excitement. David Thompson had just walked into the InnovateTech break room, where several employees were gathered for their morning coffee, and Jake's replacement, a young developer named Marcus, had been showing everyone photos from his weekend visit to South Austin's shopping district. Among those photos was a clear image of the new Bloom & Company storefront, with its updated signage, and the promotional banner announcing new ownership and expanded inventory. David had stared at the photo for several long seconds before asking Marcus where exactly he had taken it. When Marcus mentioned that his girlfriend had dragged him to Bloom & Company because she'd heard great things about their sustainable fashion selection, David's expression had shifted from casual curiosity to something approaching shock. He had pressed for more details about the boutique, asking questions about the new owners and whether Marcus knew anything about recent changes to the business. Marcus, oblivious to the personal significance of his answers, had enthusiastically described meeting the friendly new co-owner who had excellent marketing ideas and seemed to really understand what Austin customers wanted. Ryan watched this exchange from across the break room, recognizing the exact moment when David realized that his ex-wife's business was not only surviving but apparently thriving under new management. The color had drained from David's face as he processed the implications of what he was hearing, and he had abruptly left the break room without his usual morning coffee ritual. Ryan followed at a distance and saw David retreat to his office, where he immediately began making phone calls with an urgency that suggested he was trying to gather information about Bloom & Company's recent changes. I felt my heart racing as Ryan described David's reaction, knowing that our secret was about to be exposed in ways we couldn't control. We had always planned to reveal our involvement eventually, but I had hoped to choose the timing and circumstances of that revelation. Having David discover our partnership through workplace gossip and casual photography felt like losing the element of surprise that had been protecting us during the boutique's initial growth phase. Karen was restocking inventory when I called to warn her about David's discovery, and her reaction was a mixture of anxiety and determination that mirrored my own feelings. We had both known this moment would come, but the reality of facing David's response felt more intimidating than we had anticipated. Karen was particularly concerned about potential escalation of his interference tactics, wondering if direct confrontation might prompt him to become even more aggressive in his attempts to undermine the business. The afternoon brought our first indication of how David planned to respond to the news of our partnership. Ryan received a text message asking him to attend an impromptu meeting in David's office, supposedly to discuss a new project timeline, but obviously intended to gather information about our involvement with Bloom & Company. Ryan had prepared for this possibility, deciding that honest transparency would be more effective than attempting to deny our involvement, but he was still nervous about the potential consequences for his job security. David's questioning was more direct than Ryan had expected, beginning with seemingly casual inquiries about how I was spending my time lately and whether our family had made any major financial commitments recently. When Ryan confirmed that we had invested in a local business, David's demeanor shifted to barely controlled anger as he demanded specific details about our connection to his ex-wife and her boutique. Ryan explained that we had purchased Bloom & Company as a business investment, emphasizing the strong fundamentals and growth potential that had attracted our interest. David's response revealed the depth of his fury and his complete inability to accept that Karen might succeed where he had predicted failure. He accused Ryan of betraying his trust by secretly supporting his ex-wife's business, suggesting that our investment was motivated by misguided sympathy rather than sound business judgment. He questioned Ryan's loyalty to InnovateTech and implied that employees who couldn't maintain appropriate boundaries between their personal relationships and professional obligations might not be good fits for the company's future direction. The conversation escalated when David began making personal attacks on our marriage, suggesting that Ryan was being manipulated by an ambitious wife who was using their relationship to pursue her own agenda. He claimed that successful men needed to maintain control over their family's financial decisions, and that Ryan's willingness to risk their savings on a risky retail venture demonstrated exactly the kind of weakness that destroyed careers and marriages. The irony of receiving marriage advice from someone whose own relationship had ended in acrimonious divorce was apparently lost on David as he continued his tirade about the dangers of letting emotions influence business decisions. Ryan maintained his composure throughout the meeting, refusing to engage with David's personal attacks, while defending our decision as a calculated investment in Austin's growing sustainable fashion market. He pointed out that
Bloom & Company's financial performance had improved significantly since our partnership began, suggesting that our involvement was proving beneficial for all parties involved. This evidence of success only seemed to enrage David further, as it contradicted his fundamental belief that Karen was incompetent and doomed to fail. The meeting ended with David making vague threats about Ryan's future with InnovateTech, suggesting that employees who couldn't maintain focus on their professional responsibilities might find themselves facing performance reviews that question their commitment to the company. Ryan left the office knowing that his job was now in jeopardy, but also feeling relieved that the secrecy was over and we could move forward with our business partnership without worrying about discovery. That evening, our kitchen table became a war room where Ryan, Karen, and I strategized about how to respond to David's inevitable escalation. We knew he wouldn't accept our success quietly, and we needed to prepare for whatever tactics he might employ to undermine our partnership or damage the boutique's reputation. Karen shared stories about David's vindictive behavior during their divorce proceedings, describing his willingness to use any available weapon to punish people who defied his expectations or challenged his authority. Our discussion revealed that David's campaign against Bloom & Company had been motivated by more than just ex-husband's spite. It was part of a broader pattern of controlling behavior that extended to his employees, business relationships, and anyone who represented a threat to his worldview. Ryan's descriptions of workplace harassment and inappropriate personal commentary fit perfectly with Karen's experiences of emotional manipulation and financial control during their marriage. We were dealing with someone who couldn't tolerate other people's independence and would go to extraordinary lengths to prove that his cynical perspective was correct. The next morning brought immediate confirmation of our concerns when Karen arrived at Bloom & Company to find that someone had left negative reviews on multiple online platforms, all posted within hours of each other, and all containing similar language about poor customer service and overpriced merchandise. The reviews were obviously fake, written by people who had never actually shopped at the boutique, but they represented exactly the kind of reputation damage that could harm a small business if left unaddressed. I spent the morning researching online reputation management and learning about procedures for reporting fraudulent reviews, while Karen contacted our regular customers to explain the situation and ask for their support in countering the negative commentary. The response from our customer base was overwhelmingly positive, with many people expressing outrage that someone would target a local business with fake reviews and offering to write authentic testimonials about their experiences with Bloom & Company. By the afternoon, we had not only removed most of the fraudulent reviews, but actually generated more positive online feedback than the boutique had ever received before. David's attempt to damage our reputation had backfired by galvanizing our supporters and creating opportunities for satisfied customers to publicly praise our products and service. The incident also provided valuable insights about our customer loyalty and the strength of relationships Karen had built during the boutique's first year of operation. Ryan's situation at InnovateTech deteriorated rapidly as David began implementing what he called efficiency improvements that were obviously designed to create justification for termination. Ryan's project assignments became unreasonable, his deadlines were moved without notice, and his contributions to team meetings were consistently dismissed or criticized. Other employees noticed the targeted harassment but were afraid to speak up, knowing that David's vindictive tendencies could easily be redirected toward anyone who challenged his authority. The breaking point came during a company-wide meeting where David announced new policies regarding employee priorities and professional commitment. He explained that InnovateTech was entering a growth phase that would require total dedication from all staff members, suggesting that employees with significant outside obligations might struggle to meet the company's evolving expectations. While he never mentioned Ryan by name, everyone in the room understood that the new policies were designed to create pressure on married employees and anyone else who didn't fit David's vision of the ideal worker. After the meeting, Ryan found himself surrounded by colleagues who were frustrated with David's increasingly toxic management style but unsure about how to respond. Several employees confided that they were considering leaving InnovateTech,
but they were concerned about finding comparable positions in Austin's competitive tech market. The conversation revealed that David's anti-marriage crusade was affecting morale throughout the company, creating an atmosphere of uncertainty and stress that was undermining productivity and collaboration. That evening, Ryan came home with news that would change everything. He had decided to resign from InnovateTech, effective immediately, rather than continue enduring David's harassment and waiting for inevitable termination. The decision was both terrifying and liberating, eliminating our primary source of income while also freeing us from the toxic environment that had been poisoning our daily lives for months. Ryan had already begun networking for new positions and was confident that his skills and experience would be valuable to other Austin tech companies that offered healthier work environments. Karen's reaction to Ryan's resignation was immediate concern about our family's financial stability, followed by determination to ensure that Bloom & Company could support us during his job transition. We spent the weekend analyzing the boutique's cash flow and growth projections, calculating whether the business could generate enough income to cover our family's expenses while Ryan searched for new employment. The numbers were tight but manageable, particularly if we could accelerate some of the expansion plans we had been developing for later in the year. The challenge of supporting our family entirely through Bloom & Company income was daunting but also motivating, forcing us to focus completely on business growth and operational efficiency. Karen and I implemented new marketing strategies, expanded our online presence, and developed relationships with additional suppliers who could provide products that would attract new customer segments. We also began exploring opportunities for special events, trunk shows, and collaborations with other local businesses that could drive traffic and increase sales. Within 2 weeks of Ryan's resignation, Bloom & Company's monthly revenue had increased by 30%, driven by our intensified focus and the publicity generated by David's failed attempt to damage our reputation. The fake review incident had actually helped us connect with customers who appreciated our commitment to ethical business practices and wanted to support a local business that was being unfairly targeted. Our story of partnership and perseverance resonated with Austin's entrepreneurial community, generating word-of-mouth marketing that was more effective than any advertising campaign we could have afforded. Ryan's job search progressed more quickly than we had anticipated, with several companies expressing interest in his experience and availability. The tech industry's emphasis on innovation and collaboration made his background particularly valuable, and potential employers were impressed by his decision to leave a toxic work environment rather than compromise his principles. Within 3 weeks, he had accepted a position with a software development firm that offered better compensation, more flexible policies, and a company culture that actually supported work-life balance. Meanwhile, David's behavior at InnovateTech had reached levels of toxicity that were impossible for other employees to ignore. 3 more staff members had resigned, citing the hostile work environment and inappropriate management practices that made it impossible to focus on their professional responsibilities. Word was spreading through Austin's tech community about InnovateTech's internal problems, making it difficult for David to recruit qualified replacements for the employees who were leaving. The irony of David's situation was becoming apparent to everyone who knew the details of our story. His obsession with proving that marriages and partnerships were doomed to failure had led him to create exactly the kind of toxic environment that destroyed relationships and undermined success. His company was losing talented employees, his reputation in the business community was suffering, and his ex-wife's business was thriving despite his attempts at sabotage. Every prediction he had made about failure was being proven wrong by the very people he had targeted with his cynicism and harassment. 6 months after purchasing Bloom & Company, Karen and I stood in our expanded boutique space, surrounded by racks of beautiful sustainable fashion and walls lined with positive customer reviews and local press coverage about our success. The business was generating more than enough income to support both of our families. We had developed relationships with over 30 local designers and artisans, and our online presence was attracting customers from across the Southwest. Most importantly, we had created a partnership that demonstrated the power of mutual support and shared vision. Ryan's new job had exceeded our expectations in every way, offering challenges that utilized his skills while respecting his commitment to family and personal relationships. His colleagues were collaborative rather than competitive, his manager valued input and innovation, and the company culture actually supported the kind of work-life integration that David had claimed was impossible. Ryan was more productive and satisfied than he had ever been at InnovateTech, proving that supportive environments enabled success rather than hindering it. The contrast between our thriving partnerships and David's isolated bitterness was stark and undeniable. While we were building businesses and relationships that created value for everyone involved, he was destroying the company he had built and alienating the people around him through his toxic attitudes and vindictive behavior. His predictions about the impossibility of lasting success through partnership had become self-fulfilling prophecies that applied only to his own situation. Sophie had adapted to our new reality with the resilience that children often display when their parents are pursuing meaningful work. She loved visiting the boutique after school, helping with simple tasks like organizing accessories and greeting customers who often commented on her helpfulness and enthusiasm. Her presence in the store added a family atmosphere that customers appreciated, and her suggestions about products and displays often provided insights that improved our business operations. The financial success of Bloom & Company had exceeded our most optimistic projections, but the personal satisfaction of proving David wrong about partnerships and relationships was even more rewarding. We had demonstrated that marriages could make people stronger rather than weaker, that collaboration created opportunities for success that neither person could achieve alone, and that supporting other people's dreams was a pathway to fulfilling your own ambitions. Our story had become well known in Austin's business community, inspiring other entrepreneurs who were navigating challenges related to toxic relationships or unsupportive environments. Karen and I began speaking at local business events about partnership dynamics, sustainable fashion, and the importance of creating supportive networks that enabled success rather than undermining it. Our message resonated with audiences who were tired of cynical attitudes about relationships and eager to hear examples of collaboration that actually worked. Looking back on the journey from that first coffee meeting with Karen to our current success, I realized that David Thompson had actually done us a favor by being so thoroughly wrong about everything he claimed to understand about relationships and business. His interference had forced us to develop resilience, his skepticism had motivated us to prove our capabilities, and his toxicity had helped us appreciate the value of supportive partnerships that much more deeply. The boutique continued to grow, Ryan thrived in his new position, and our marriage became stronger through the challenges we had navigated together. Sophie was proud of her parents' accomplishments and excited about the future we were building as a family. Most importantly, we had learned that the best response to cynicism and negativity was not argument or confrontation, but simply demonstrating through our actions that a better way was possible. David Thompson might never understand that his predictions about failure revealed more about his own limitations than about the impossibility of lasting partnerships, but that was no longer our concern. We had built something beautiful and successful together, proving that love, respect, and mutual support could create opportunities that cynicism and control could never generate. Our story was just beginning, but we already knew it would have a much happier ending than David had predicted. The transformation of our lives became even more profound as the months progressed beyond what any of us could have imagined when I first walked into that coffee shop to meet Karen. By October, exactly 8 months after purchasing Bloom & Company, we had not only exceeded every financial projection we had made, but fundamentally changed the landscape of sustainable fashion in Austin. What started as a desperate attempt to prove David Thompson wrong about partnerships had evolved into something far more significant than personal vindication. Karen and I had discovered that our complementary skills created synergies that neither of us had anticipated during our initial planning sessions. Her eye for design and deep understanding of sustainable fashion trends, combined with my marketing background and business development experience, had generated innovations that were attracting attention from fashion industry publications and environmental organizations across Texas. We had been featured in Austin Monthly as one of the city's most promising new business partnerships, and Texas Monthly had included Bloom & Company in their annual guide to the state's most innovative retailers. The boutique's success had created opportunities for expansion that required careful consideration of our long-term vision and values. We had been approached by investors interested in funding additional locations throughout Texas, fashion industry executives curious about franchising opportunities, and even a documentary filmmaker who wanted to tell the story of our partnership as an example of women supporting women in business. Each opportunity presented potential benefits and risks that forced us to articulate exactly what we wanted Bloom & Company to become as it grew beyond our original Austin location. Ryan's career trajectory had taken an equally dramatic turn as word spread through Austin's technology community about his experience at InnovateTech and his decision to prioritize personal values over financial security. His new employer, Catalyst Solutions, had not only offered him a senior developer position with a 20% salary increase, but had also asked him to lead a team focused on developing software solutions for small businesses. The irony that Ryan was now helping other entrepreneurs build successful companies while David's toxic leadership was driving talent away from InnovateTech was not lost on any of us. The most unexpected development was the number of InnovateTech employees who had reached out to Ryan for advice about leaving the company and finding healthier work environments. What had started as individual conversations about David's inappropriate behavior had evolved into an informal support network for people navigating toxic workplace situations. Ryan found himself mentoring former colleagues, reviewing resumes, and making introductions that helped talented developers find positions with companies that valued their skills and respected their personal boundaries. Meanwhile, David Thompson's professional reputation was unraveling in ways that demonstrated the long-term consequences of treating people as disposable resources rather than valuable human beings. InnovateTech had lost over 30% of its development staff in 6 months, including some of the company's most experienced and productive employees. The remaining staff was struggling to maintain existing client relationships while competing for new projects against firms that offered stability and positive work environments. Industry gossip suggested that several major clients had expressed concerns about InnovateTech's ability to deliver consistent results given the constant turnover and internal disruption. David's attempts to blame departing employees for the company's problems had only reinforced his reputation as a leader who couldn't accept responsibility for creating the toxic culture that was driving away talent. Business publications that had previously featured InnovateTech as a successful Austin startup were now writing cautionary articles about the importance of leadership accountability and employee retention. The contrast between David's deteriorating professional situation and our thriving business partnership had become a case study that business schools and management consultants were using to illustrate the difference between leadership styles that created value versus those that destroyed it. Karen and I had been invited to speak at the University of Texas Business School about partnership dynamics and sustainable business practices, sharing our story with students who were learning about entrepreneurship and relationship management. Our presentation at UT had been particularly meaningful because it allowed us to articulate the principles that had guided our decision-making throughout the process of building Bloom & Company. We emphasized that successful partnerships required mutual respect, clear communication, shared values, and the willingness to support each other through challenges rather than competing for individual recognition. The students' questions revealed that many young entrepreneurs were hungry for examples of collaboration that created win-win outcomes rather than zero-sum competitions. The financial impact of our success had exceeded our most optimistic projections, allowing us to pay off the business loan ahead of schedule while also investing in expansion opportunities that would create jobs for other Austin residents. We had hired 4 full-time employees and 6 part-time staff members, including several people who had been struggling to find work that accommodated their family responsibilities or personal circumstances. Creating employment opportunities that prioritized work-life balance felt like a natural extension of our commitment to supporting other people's success. Karen's personal transformation throughout this journey had been remarkable to witness, as she evolved from someone who questioned her own business instincts to a confident entrepreneur who was being sought out for advice by other women starting their own companies. The divorce that David had intended as punishment for her independence had actually freed her to discover capabilities and strength that years of marriage to a controlling partner had suppressed. Her success with Bloom & Company was proving that leaving toxic relationships, whether personal or professional, often created space for growth that would have been impossible otherwise. Sophie's involvement with the boutique had grown beyond simple after-school visits to genuine contributions that demonstrated her developing business instincts and social awareness. She had suggested several inventory additions that became bestsellers, including a line of sustainable accessories for young people that had generated requests for similar products from other retailers. Her natural ability to connect with customers and her enthusiasm for the boutique's mission made her an unofficial ambassador who was helping us reach younger demographics that might not have discovered sustainable fashion otherwise. The ripple effects of our success were creating opportunities for other local businesses and artisans who shared our commitment to ethical practices and community support. We had developed partnerships with over 50 local designers, craftspeople, and artists, creating a network of small businesses that supported each other through cross-promotion, collaborative events, and shared resources. This ecosystem of mutually supportive enterprises was demonstrating that competition didn't have to be destructive and that small businesses could thrive by working together rather than trying to dominate their markets. Ryan's leadership of the small business software development team at Catalyst Solutions had led to innovations that were helping other entrepreneurs overcome the same challenges we had faced during Bloom & Company's early months. His team had developed inventory management systems, customer relationship tools, and financial tracking applications specifically designed for retail businesses like ours. The software was being used by over 200 small businesses across Texas, creating efficiencies that helped independent retailers compete more effectively against large corporations. The personal satisfaction of proving David wrong about marriage and partnerships had evolved into something deeper and more meaningful, as we realized that our story was inspiring other people to challenge toxic relationships and pursue their own dreams despite skepticism from others. We received emails from customers, fellow entrepreneurs, and complete strangers who shared their own stories of overcoming controlling partners, unsupportive family members, or toxic work environments. Our success had become permission for other people to believe that better situations were possible if they were willing to take risks and work toward change. Karen's relationship with her ex-husband had stabilized into professional indifference, as David apparently realized that continued interference would only further damage his own reputation without affecting our success. The legal protections we had implemented early in our partnership had prevented any serious attempts at sabotage, while our business growth had made us less vulnerable to the kind of disruption that had threatened Bloom & Company during its early months. David's predictions about our inevitable failure had been so thoroughly disproven that even he seemed to have accepted that his campaign had backfired. The boutique's expansion into online sales had exceeded our expectations, with customers from across the country discovering our curated selection of sustainable fashion and ethical accessories. Our website was generating nearly 40% of total revenue, allowing us to reach environmentally conscious consumers who didn't have access to similar retailers in their own communities. The online success had created opportunities for wholesale relationships with other boutiques that wanted to carry the exclusive lines we had developed with local designers. Ryan's experience mentoring former InnovateTech employees had inspired him to develop workshops and networking events for technology professionals who were dealing with workplace harassment or considering career transitions. These sessions provided practical advice about job searching, resume development, and interview preparation, while also creating support networks for people navigating difficult professional situations. The workshops had become so popular that Ryan was considering developing them into a consulting business that could help both individuals and companies create healthier work environments. Our family's financial security had improved dramatically as both the boutique and Ryan's new career generated income that exceeded our previous earnings, while also providing greater flexibility and job satisfaction. We had been able to establish college savings for Sophie, create emergency funds that provided peace of mind, and begin planning for long-term goals that had seemed impossible when we were dependent on Ryan's InnovateTech salary. The financial independence was satisfying, but the sense of control over our own destiny was even more valuable. The anniversary of our business partnership approached with celebrations that reflected how far we had traveled from those early coffee meetings when buying Bloom & Company had seemed like an impossible dream. Karen and I planned a party that would thank our customers, employees, suppliers, and supporters, while also recognizing the role that our community had played in our success. The event would feature fashion shows highlighting local designers, presentations about sustainable business practices, and networking opportunities for entrepreneurs who were building their own ethical enterprises. Looking toward the future, we could see possibilities that extended far beyond what we had imagined when our primary goal was simply proving David Thompson wrong about partnerships and marriage. Bloom & Company had become a platform for promoting sustainable fashion, supporting local artisans, and demonstrating that business success could be measured by community impact as well as financial returns. Our partnership had shown that collaboration created opportunities for innovation and growth that neither of us could have achieved independently. The lessons we had learned about recognizing and challenging toxic behavior were being applied to other areas of our lives and community involvement. We had become advocates for workplace equality, supporters of other women-owned businesses, and mentors for entrepreneurs who were navigating the challenges of starting companies while maintaining healthy relationships. Our story had demonstrated that standing up to bullying and manipulation, whether in personal relationships or professional settings, often created space for positive changes that benefited everyone involved. Sophie's perspective on our journey provided insights that reminded us why challenging David's cynical worldview had been so important. She had watched her parents work together to build something meaningful, seen her mother and Karen develop a friendship that created opportunities for both women, and learned that partnerships could be sources of strength rather than weakness. These lessons about collaboration and mutual support would influence her own relationships and career choices as she grew up in a family that had proven the power of working together toward shared goals. The transformation of our lives from David's predictions about inevitable failure to our current success had created a narrative that resonated with people who were facing their own challenges with toxic relationships or unsupportive environments. Our story offered proof that leaving bad situations, even when the alternatives seemed risky or uncertain, could lead to opportunities that were far better than what we had thought possible. The courage to challenge David's interference and support Karen's business had opened doors to experiences and achievements that none of us had anticipated when we first decided to take action. As we prepared for whatever challenges and opportunities the future might bring, we knew that the foundation we had built together could support continued growth and positive impact in our community. David Thompson's certainty about the impossibility of lasting partnerships had been proven spectacularly wrong, but more importantly, we had demonstrated that relationships built on respect, communication, and shared values could create success that benefited everyone involved. Our partnership had become living proof that the best response to cynicism and negativity was not argument or confrontation, but simply building something better and sharing it with the world. The winter holidays brought an unexpected invitation that would crystallize everything our journey had represented over the past year. Austin Business Journal had selected Bloom & Company as their Small Business of the Year, recognizing not only our financial success but our impact on the local community and our innovative approach to sustainable retail. The awards ceremony would take place at the Four Seasons downtown with an audience of Austin's most influential business leaders, entrepreneurs, and civic officials. What made the invitation particularly meaningful was learning that we would be receiving the award in the same ballroom where InnovateTech had held their holiday parties during happier times in David and Karen's marriage. Karen's reaction to the news was a mixture of pride, gratitude, and poetic justice that reflected how dramatically her life had transformed since those dark months when David's sabotage had nearly destroyed her confidence and her business. Standing in the boutique surrounded by the beautiful displays we had created together, she talked about how receiving recognition in the same venue where she had once felt obligated to smile through David's condescending introductions felt like closing a circle that had begun with pain but was ending with triumph. The scared, doubting woman who had considered closing Bloom & Company less than a year ago had been replaced by a confident entrepreneur whose vision was being celebrated by the entire Austin business community. The preparation for the awards ceremony became an opportunity to reflect on every aspect of our journey and to articulate the principles that had guided our decisions throughout the process of building something meaningful together. The speech I would deliver on behalf of our partnership needed to capture not only our business success but the broader message about collaboration, mutual support, and the power of refusing to accept other people's limitations as our own reality. We spent evenings at Karen's dining table, crafting words that would honor everyone who had supported us while also challenging the cynical attitudes that too often prevented people from pursuing their dreams. Ryan's role in our success story had evolved beyond just being the supportive husband who had risked his job security to enable our business venture. His experience leading the small business development team at InnovateTech Solutions had generated innovations that were helping entrepreneurs throughout Texas overcome the same obstacles we had faced during Bloom & Company's early months. The software solutions his team had created were being used by over 400 small businesses, creating efficiencies and opportunities that were strengthening local economies across multiple cities. His work had become a natural extension of our commitment to supporting other people's success rather than competing for individual recognition. The weeks leading up to the ceremony brought unexpected revelations about the broader impact our story had created within Austin's business community. We learned that several other couples had started their own ventures after hearing about our partnership, inspired by our example that marriages could be sources of strength rather than obstacles to professional achievement. 3 women had left toxic work environments to pursue entrepreneurship after attending our speaking engagements, and 2 of them had already launched successful businesses that were contributing to Austin's reputation as a supportive environment for innovative enterprises. Perhaps most significantly, we discovered that InnovateTech's board of directors had begun questioning David's leadership effectiveness as the company's performance continued to decline. The exodus of talented employees had created operational challenges that were affecting client relationships and new business development. Industry sources suggested that David was facing pressure to address his management style or consider stepping back from day-to-day operations. The irony that his obsession with proving partnerships were doomed had led to the destruction of his own professional partnerships was becoming apparent to everyone except David himself. Karen's relationship with her extended family had also transformed as relatives who had expressed skepticism about her ability to succeed in business were now proudly sharing news of her achievements with their own networks. Her sister, who had questioned the wisdom of leaving a financially secure marriage to pursue uncertain entrepreneurship, had become one of Bloom & Company's most enthusiastic promoters. Her parents, who had worried that the divorce would leave her financially vulnerable, were now bragging to their friends about their daughter's business acumen and community recognition. The validation felt meaningful not because Karen needed their approval, but because it demonstrated how success could change other people's perceptions about what was possible for women who chose independence over security. Sophie's involvement with the boutique had expanded beyond casual after-school visits to genuine contributions that were shaping our business strategy and community outreach. Her suggestion that we create a youth advisory panel had led to the development of sustainable fashion workshops for teenagers, environmental education programs that connected fashion choices to broader ecological issues, and mentorship opportunities that paired young people with local designers and entrepreneurs. Her natural ability to bridge generational gaps and her enthusiasm for environmental issues had made her an unofficial spokesperson for sustainable fashion among Austin's younger demographics. The financial success of Bloom & Company had created opportunities for charitable giving and community investment that reflected our values while also strengthening our connections to the causes and organizations that mattered most to us. We had established a scholarship fund for young women pursuing business education, partnered with local schools to provide internship opportunities for students interested in retail and marketing, and donated a percentage of our profits to environmental organizations working on issues related to sustainable manufacturing and ethical labor practices. These investments felt like natural extensions of our belief that business success should create positive ripple effects throughout the community. Ryan's mentoring work with professionals navigating toxic work environments had evolved into a consulting practice that was helping both individuals and companies address workplace culture issues before they became destructive. His workshops on recognizing and responding to professional harassment were being requested by human resources departments, professional associations, and graduate business programs throughout Central Texas. The demand for these services reflected how many people were dealing with situations similar to what we had experienced at InnovateTech, and how few resources existed to help them navigate these challenges effectively. The night of the awards ceremony arrived with December weather that was perfect for Austin, crisp and clear with the kind of evening light that made the city look magical. Karen and I had chosen outfits from our boutique's collection, wearing designs from local artisans whose work we had been promoting throughout the year. Sophie accompanied us as our special guest, wearing a dress from our new youth sustainable fashion line that had been featured in several national publications as an example of how environmental consciousness could be incorporated into children's clothing without sacrificing style or fun. Walking into the Four Seasons ballroom felt surreal as I recognized the space from InnovateTech holiday parties we had attended during the years when David had seemed like a successful leader rather than a cautionary tale about the destructive power of unchecked ego and cynicism. The same room where Karen had once endured condescending remarks about her interests and ambitions was now the setting for her recognition as one of Austin's most innovative entrepreneurs. The transformation of context felt like a metaphor for everything that had changed in our lives over the past year. The ceremony itself was elegant and inspiring, featuring presentations from business leaders, civic officials, and fellow entrepreneurs who spoke about Austin's growing reputation as a city that supported innovation, collaboration, and sustainable business practices. When our names were called and we walked to the podium together, the applause felt like validation not just for our individual achievements but for our decision to prove that partnerships could create success rather than limiting it. Standing at the microphone with Karen beside me and our families in the audience, I felt the weight of responsibility to speak for everyone who had ever been told their dreams were unrealistic or their relationships were obstacles to success. My speech focused on the power of refusing to accept other people's limitations as our own reality, emphasizing that the most meaningful achievements often came from challenging conventional wisdom about what was possible when people worked together rather than competing against each other. I talked about how our partnership had demonstrated that success could be measured by community impact as well as financial returns, and that the strongest businesses were built on foundations of mutual respect and shared values rather than individual ambition and control. The audience's response suggested that our message was resonating with people who had experienced their own challenges with toxic relationships or unsupportive environments. Karen's portion of our presentation highlighted the importance of supporting other people's dreams as a pathway to fulfilling your own ambitions, sharing stories about the local designers and artisans whose work had been featured in our boutique and the ways that collaboration had created opportunities for everyone involved. She spoke about how leaving her marriage had initially felt like failure but had actually created space for growth and achievement that would have been impossible within a relationship built on control rather than partnership. Her confidence and eloquence demonstrated how much she had grown since those early coffee meetings when she had questioned her own business instincts. The reception following the ceremony provided opportunities to connect with other business leaders and entrepreneurs who shared our commitment to creating positive change through their work. We met couples who were building businesses together, women who had left corporate environments to pursue their own ventures, and men who were challenging traditional attitudes about gender roles and workplace dynamics. The conversations revealed that our story was part of a larger movement toward more collaborative and inclusive approaches to business and professional relationships. The most meaningful moment of the evening came when a young woman approached us to share how our speaking engagement at UT had inspired her to leave an abusive relationship and pursue the business degree she had abandoned years earlier. She was now in her final semester, planning to start her own company focused on sustainable technology solutions, and credited our example with showing her that leaving toxic situations often created opportunities for growth rather than just causing disruption. Her story reminded us that the impact of our journey extended far beyond our own family and business to touch the lives of people we might never meet but whose courage had been strengthened by our example. The drive home that night was filled with reflection about how dramatically our lives had changed since the morning when Ryan had first come home with stories about David's inappropriate comments about marriage and relationships. What had started as frustration with workplace harassment had evolved into a business partnership that was creating jobs, supporting local artisans, and demonstrating that collaboration could generate success that benefited entire communities. The recognition we had received felt meaningful not because we needed external validation but because it provided a platform to share our message with other people who might be facing their own challenges with toxic relationships or unsupportive environments. The weeks following the ceremony brought opportunities that reflected our growing reputation as advocates for collaborative business practices and sustainable entrepreneurship. We were invited to serve on advisory boards for organizations supporting women-owned businesses, to participate in panels discussing workplace culture and professional relationships, and to mentor other entrepreneurs who were navigating the challenges of building companies while maintaining healthy personal relationships. These invitations felt like natural extensions of our commitment to using our success to create opportunities for other people rather than just advancing our own interests. Karen's confidence had reached levels that would have seemed impossible during those early months when David's sabotage was undermining her belief in her own capabilities. She was now being sought out for advice by other women considering divorce, entrepreneurs dealing with professional harassment, and business owners struggling to maintain their values while achieving financial success. Her transformation from someone who questioned her own judgment to a mentor and advocate for other women demonstrated how leaving toxic relationships often revealed strength and wisdom that had been suppressed rather than absent. Ryan's work helping other professionals navigate toxic work environments had generated requests from companies wanting to address culture problems before they led to talent exodus and reputation damage. His consulting practice was demonstrating that the costs of tolerating inappropriate behavior far exceeded the investment required to create supportive and productive work environments. The demand for these services reflected how many organizations were recognizing that leadership styles like David's were becoming liabilities rather than assets in competitive industries that depended on attracting and retaining talented employees. Sophie's involvement with our business and community work had sparked her interest in environmental science and sustainable business practices, leading to school projects and extracurricular activities that were already positioning her as a young leader in Austin's environmental community. Her natural ability to communicate with people of all ages and her genuine passion for making positive changes were creating opportunities for her to participate in city council meetings, environmental education programs, and youth leadership initiatives that were shaping Austin's future as a sustainable and inclusive city. The financial success of Bloom and Company had exceeded our most optimistic projections, but the personal satisfaction of proving that partnerships could create meaningful change was even more rewarding than the economic benefits. We had demonstrated that marriage could be a source of strength rather than limitation, that business relationships built on mutual respect could generate innovation and growth, and that challenging toxic behavior often created space for positive changes that benefited everyone involved. Our story had become living proof that the best response to cynicism and negativity was not argument or confrontation but simply building something better and sharing it with the world. Looking toward the future, we could see possibilities that extended far beyond what we had imagined when our primary goal was simply proving David Thompson wrong about the inevitability of failure in partnerships and relationships. Bloom and Company had become a platform for promoting sustainable business practices, supporting local entrepreneurs, and demonstrating that success could be measured by community impact as well as financial returns. Our partnership had shown that collaboration created opportunities for achievement and fulfillment that neither of us could have reached independently, and that the courage to challenge toxic behavior often led to discoveries about our own capabilities and potential. The anniversary of our business partnership was approaching, with celebrations planned that would honor everyone who had supported our journey while also recognizing the role that our community had played in our success. The event would feature fashion shows highlighting local designers, presentations about sustainable business practices, networking opportunities for entrepreneurs building their own ethical enterprises, and workshops for couples interested in starting businesses together. Most importantly, it would provide a platform to share our message that partnerships built on respect, communication, and shared values could create success that benefited everyone involved. As we prepared for whatever challenges and opportunities the future might bring, we knew that the foundation we had built together could support continued growth and positive impact in our community and beyond. David Thompson's predictions about the impossibility of lasting partnerships had been proven spectacularly wrong, but more importantly, we had demonstrated that relationships built on mutual support rather than control could create opportunities that neither person could achieve alone. Our partnership had become an example that success was not a zero-sum game where one person's achievement required another person's failure, but a collaborative process where everyone could benefit from working together toward shared goals. The transformation of our lives from David's cynical expectations to our current reality had created a narrative that resonated with people facing their own challenges with toxic relationships, unsupportive work environments, or limited beliefs about what was possible when people chose collaboration over competition. Our story offered proof that leaving bad situations, even when the alternative seemed risky or uncertain, could lead to opportunities and achievements that far exceeded what we had thought possible. The courage to challenge David's interference and support Karen's dreams had opened doors to experiences and successes that none of us had anticipated when we first decided to take action against his toxic behavior. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.